Hello everyone and welcome to Season of AI MCP edition. And today we are excited to have Haimantika ma'am with us who will be delivering a powerful session on AI and MCP. So if you are looking to stay ahead in the world of MCP, this is a session you won't want to miss. So without any further delay, I would like to invite Haimantika ma'am to take us on this exciting journey.
Hi, thanks Shudhanshu for the wonderful introduction, and to everybody who is watching us live or who will also watch this one recorded. Hi, and I am very excited that you are interested in learning a little bit about MCP. So, before we start with the introduction and with the entire session, I would like to say that MCP is still very newer concept. It's still being developed. So, if you are reading about it now, or if you're building MCP, you are already ahead of let's say you're already on track with all the things that's going on in and around MCP. So it's a good time for you to get started learning because you get to know or get to see it right from the beginning. And by the time it fully matures, there's not a lot of backlog that you would have to read about. With that, let's start with the session. So, our topic for today is going to be MCP, like you can already see. And hi, once again, this is Haimantika Mitra, and I am quite active on LinkedIn and also Twitter or X. What you see below on the right is my X handle, Haimantika M. So, if at any point of time, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them on X or also on LinkedIn. And a little bit of introduction about me. Hi, once again. This is Haimantika, and I work as a senior developer advocate at DigitalOcean, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP for web development. Other than that, I love to travel, and I also build a lot of fun side projects like the one I have here below, which is a terminal command. You can, if you have npm installed, which I hope you do, just go to your terminal, type npx space hello hyphen Haimantika. It's an introductory package. And if you would like to build something like that of your own, I also have the code on GitHub and it's pinned on my profile. So feel free to just copy that and build your own. And with that, let's get started. Also, if any of you are watching it live, I will also check comments and maybe I'll try to answer your questions live. If not, like I mentioned, feel free to DM me at any point of time. With that, so here are two tweets of people I look up to personally. One is from James, who says that okay, there is a lot of hype about MCP, but it's end of the day is just an API. And then we have a tweet by Angie, where in the last OpenAI Dev Day we saw that how big companies like um, OpenAI, then Anthropic built it. So Anthropic is definitely there, and even Microsoft and other companies are actually taking up MCP and building on top of it. So while it's a very new concept, but we see companies and like even developers are building a lot with it. So it's and by the end of the session and by the end of the entire series, you will notice that it's not very hard a concept. And as James mentioned, it might feel like just an API because of depending on the type of application that it has. But at the end, you'll see that it's a protocol and how easy it is to be used. So that's a little bit of context setting on MCP and how the world looks at it right now. But before I go into the definition and before I also show you how to build your own MCP servers, let's understand that why does MCP even exist? What was the need for Anthropic to come up with something like an MCP when we already had different XDKs and function calling? So if anybody here, if you have used LLM, any LLM provider, be it OpenAI or Anthropic or Gemini, you would have noticed that they all expose function calling differently. And there are SDKs like LangChain or Llama Index that try to abstract this, but they all build on their own closed loop. So what has happened at the end is that we have fragmented ecosystems where the same weather API, if you all know, like this weather API is a very common example or a common app that most of us have built while we were learning about API. So it's end of the day is the same weather API weather API that you we are using, but it is integrated differently because there is different providers have different frameworks and different way of doing their function calling. That's why it's like let's say if I would want to move from Gemini to Anthropic or OpenAI or something like that, I would have to change the way it be like the function calling because of how things are done. And this was before MCP was a thing. So, but on that note, function calling in itself was a big leap. It lets us use models, it lets the model use the tools, and with SDKs it made it very useful or easy for us as developers to use it. But often if we had to use, let's say if we would want to um, like if we would want to combine both the things, it would we would have to change how things work, and we would also have to change the entire tool layer. So this is a major reason why something like MCP was even brought to life. And like it's there in the slide, so everything that I just mentioned, that even to do a simple thing you would have to, and if you had to change or if you had to move from one provider to other, it was a brand new thing that you would have to do. So this was the big problem that most developers or the industry in itself was having, and that is when Anthropic came up with the term called MCP. So like you see here, it's the picture itself, it says that what defines MCP. So there's resources, there's some actions, there's prompts, and then we also have some context. So with MCP, like you have probably heard HTTP, it's not an SDK, it's not a plugin, but it is a protocol. And because of MCP, there is now a standard way of how models can use external tools like APIs or data, and the way that they are discovering or connecting with these tools is very consistent, and they can do it safely as well. So now instead of functions that are hard coded in JSON schema, we have MCPs that use declarative definitions on what's available and what can be accessed safely. So any LLM that understands MCP can use these definitions, and they do not need to do any SDK rewrites. So that's a little bit of how MCP has changed the way of how we were previously building with AI. So now there is a protocol, and we don't have to change, we do not have to do a new SDK rewrite, we can just use the protocol. And because of this protocol, now we have models, all the models that's in question, they can now interact with external tools or APIs or anything third party. So that's how there was a problem of us doing the same thing, repetitive thing in different ways, because there was not one general way of doing things. Now we have MCP that was introduced because it is a protocol, or it's a single way of doing the same thing. So if I had to define what is an MCP, so you all have probably heard that tools like Cursor and Claude, these are the interfaces by which we can use MCPs. And using these interfaces, maybe we could call tools like GitHub, or we could almost every popular tool that Figma has an MCP server. So almost all the popular tools that you know about or you use now supports MCP. So for developers like us, or even for not regular people as well who are not involved in coding as much, and if you're using any chat interface like maybe Claude Desktop, you can use your the chat app, and you can, or let's say the chat interface, and you can connect or talk to these applications. So what, so a little bit of context of what AI could do before and what AI can do now after we have introduced MCPs. So AI can write code, it can summarize, and even chat like humans. But the moment you ask it to do something, let's say, but the moment you ask it to perform an action, it they stall and they're not able to perform it. And why does that happen? Because most tools, they still need, like, let's say for previously before MCP existed, you would have to build integrations for the for AI to use a particular tool. But with MCP, this has changed. Now there is a simple protocol, or now that there's a standard way by which AI tools can plug into other tools or data and services, and you don't have to do any hand coding for that. So if I had to give an example, this is a very common example that you have probably heard about or come across when you heard the term MCP, like we have a USB-C adapter, like my webcam, my not my mic, but then my desk, my let's say monitor, everything is connected to my laptop with the USB-C port. So let's consider that my laptop, it could be cloud, and then my webcam, my monitor, these are the third party tools, and the USB-C adapter that I have, this is the MCP server. So this is like a standard way, or it is a protocol by which, like the USB-C adapter that I have, this is MCP, and this is what is connecting the tools to my AI products, or let's say tools. So this is what MCP in in general or in very layman terms is. Now that we know what MCP is, why it exists, and what was the need for MCP, let us also answer the question that how does it differ from a regular API, or how things were before MCP, like before we had MCP, how were things. So like I mentioned that before MCP, to plug and play with different LLM providers or models, you would have to do that manually with their APIs. But now MCP gives a standard protocol for all tools, and with traditional APIs, it was not very flexible. It was very tool specific. But MCP, since it's one way to deal with all the other problems, so it's very dynamic and adaptable, and it's also very flexible. And with the demo that I will show soon after this, you will see that it's so easy. Like there are two main things that MCP has, which is called known as tools and resources, and then the communication method. And because of these, because of how simple it is to build and use, it is also very easy to copy the exact format and reuse it for different tools. I will show you how you can actually build an MCP server for yourself, and once you understand how it works, I'll also give you some takeaway or homework that you can actually follow back, and also do the same for build your own MCP server. So once you get the crux, you'll understand how easily it is to build, and then you'll also have the fun of building MCP servers for your own tool of choice. Then we talked a little bit about scalability. Um, it's built to scale, so you don't really have to worry a lot about scalability. And then it also, there's, you do not need to add a custom logic for each tool. There is a particular way of building it, and once it is done, once it's connected to the let's say to the client, which is Claude or Cursor, any such tool, it's good to be used. And then it's also very automatic, so you'll see how it really works, how it works in real time. It's very automatic, and there's no manual configuration that's needed. So this is a very basic definition, or let's say difference between how MCP differs from traditional APIs, though it might just look like an API call. But the difference is, this is everything that we just talked about here. So this particular image, I had taken it from the internet, so credit goes to the user. But maybe you can also take a screenshot of this if at any time you feel the confusion between APIs and MCP. Going forward, a little bit of what the how the MCP architecture looks like. So you see that right here we have, on the left we have an MCP client, and or let's say an MCP host, which could be the AI powered app. In our case, the example that I will show will be Cursor. It also could be your Claude desktop or any other tool that's acting as the agent. Then the host, which is on the left, it connects to multiple MCP servers, and each one is exposing a different tool or different resource. When I go to Claude, you'll understand what these tools and resources really mean. Now, some servers, they maybe some servers access local files, like a file system or a database on a computer. Other servers can probably reach out to remote resources like APIs. Like I'll show you an example of DigitalOcean MCP server. Then there are also MCP servers by GitHub that you can use. So they are all exposed to APIs from DigitalOcean and GitHub. So on the right that you see, these are the servers that we have. So end of the day, what MCP is really doing is, it is helping a client and a server communicate, and it is the communication protocol in between them. And on the, sorry, on the right again, you'll see that there is it could be a local local resources, it could be third party or remote resources like API, and all of this communication that we have that is happening between the host and the server, it happens with the standardized protocol, which in our case is MCP, or model context protocol. And like I had given you an example, it's like the adapter for a tool or an app, and it knows how to take a request from AI, which could be Claude or Cursor in our case, and translate it into commands that the tools can understand. And soon after this, let's see this with a demo. So basically, what it is doing is, because of this protocol, the standardized protocol in between, it the MCP will know when to call the 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 message or the prompt that we are writing, and then what tools to call and what kind of response to get back. So for now, I'll stop sharing this tab and I'll start sharing my entire screen. Just a second. uh, Here I am. Okay, cool, I'm sharing my entire screen. Perfect. So we this is, by the way, the demo server that I will show you how to build. But before that, let's go to our settings and also zoom in a bit so that you all can see it clearly. And if you go to this settings part of Cursor, and if you scroll down a bit, you'll see this option called tools and MCP. So currently I have three MCP servers on it. The third one is what I built, and I'll show you how I actually built it. The first one is the DigitalOcean app platform MCP server. To give a little bit of context, app platform is something similar to Vercel or Netlify, where you can basically deploy your applications and then it will give you a URL or a domain that you can, basically it's a platform where you can deploy your applications, and then you can share the deployed URL with your friends and family. So we have three MCP servers that's there. This one is loading tools and it's mostly happening because, as far as I can remember, the GitHub token has expired. So I'll just turn it off right now. But let's just work with the DigitalOcean MCP server that we have here. So now the client here is Cursor, and when I type a message something like, how many apps do I have deployed in DigitalOcean, if everything is working as per expectations, this will know, like Cursor, which is a client, will know that, okay, I did not mention it to use MCP, but it knows that there is an MCP server about DigitalOcean, and now it knows that, okay, I'll have to run a query for that. So now it is running a query. So like, and then it gives me a list of all the apps that I have. So it says that, okay, you have 9 apps that are deployed, and if I need any specific details on the apps, it can also give me that. And also, if I'm building an app, I can just type here on Cursor that help me deploy the app on DigitalOcean, and the MCP server will do it because of all of these tools that we have. Oops, let's go back here. Let's see if I can see the tools that I have. So these tools that we see, these are something that performs a particular task. That list apps, it will list all. We use this particular tool, which is to list all the apps that I have in my DigitalOcean account. Then there is update apps. Let's say I want to update an existing app, I can do that. So there are around 30 plus tools that we support. So these perform particular tasks on an app platform, and everything that I explained in theory is what you see happening in real life. So this is a client, and the server is a third party API, which is a DigitalOcean API. And then I am writing prompts, or let's say I'm writing the message on my client, which is Cursor, and then the MCP tool, which is the protocol in between. It knows which tool to call and what and how to make the, let's say, the how to connect these two and then do the work for us. So this is how MCP is working in general. But we talked a little bit about tools and resources. So to give you a little bit of explanation, or let's say diagrammatic explanation of what tools and resources are. So tools, these are the functions that the AI can call. Like I showed you in the example, like it could probably list apps, it could deploy apps, or it could give us some specifications about the apps, or it could help us update the apps. So these are the functions, or the let's say the tasks that we want AI to help us do it, and tools are the functions that AI can call and help in doing those tasks. And then we have resources. Now these resources are the data resources that AI can read, and in our case the data resource for especially for the DigitalOcean one is DigitalOcean, and the communication protocol that's happening is JSON RPC. So whenever you are building an MCP server, which we will see right now, all that you need to think about or care about is how to define the tool, how to define the resources. So let's go back to our code, and this is the code that we have. I'll just close this one. So we are just importing the MCP server, and then what we are doing here is we are giving it a name. Since this is a demo MCP server, I just wrote it quick demo MCP. I just gave it a random version. But now if you scroll down, you'll see that there is this tool, and then there is this resource as well. So what this demo MCP server does is whenever I ask what is the server time, it will give me the server time back as a response. So that is what I am defining in this tool. And what I say here is, okay, this is like get server time, and what you're supposed to do is get the current server time. And then we just mention, like, write this function right here. Then we have the resource, and here's the URI. If it was DigitalOcean, or if it was a GitHub MCP server, then the URI for this one would be related to the tool that we're connecting to it. But since this is a demo one, we are doing it as it is. And then we just give it a little bit of description of what what this demo server does. And then in this function again, we are sending the same URI and then a MIME type, and then we tell, okay, this is a demo MCP server that is exposing the tools and resources, and then we are finally starting the server. So let's go back to our chat, and when I type things like what is the server time, it should be able to give me it should know that, okay, there's an MCP server that I have that gets the server time, and I should run it to give the server time. So now when I click on run, you'll see that it is giving me the server time as per the MCP server that we just built. But this doesn't end here. So before you I'll show you the JSON file. I'm not showing it right now because I have the credentials there. But before you add it to your cursor settings, it's always advised that you do a little bit of test. And the code, I'll share the link to the code on GitHub. But then what this test does is it, let's say it tests a few methods. The first one is it's doing the handshake communication. Then what this does is then it lists the tools that we have, it lists the resources that we have, then it calls the tools to get the server time, and then it reads the resources. So if you do a little bit of testing locally and then you see that it's working as per expectations, then you go to your MCP JSON. So when you go to cursor settings and when you click on this plus button of add a custom server, so it will lead you to this mcp.json file, and there you need to mention something like this. All that you need to mention is the name of the MCP server and what command. So maybe it could be npx, and there could be some, like, especially if it's something like a third party application like GitHub or DigitalOcean, where you would need to add your API keys, then you'll need to add those tokens. But since this is happening locally, so the only thing that I needed to add in this section is just the root to this index.js file, which has the code, which has the tools and resources. But the moment you want to do it something differently, you would have to add a different path to this argument field. So that's how very easily you can build your own MCP server. And like we just saw in this demo, it will know which MCP server to call, which tools to initiate, and what kind of response to get. And that was all for the demo. Before I give you a little bit of more resources, I do have a task for you. I'll share the link to this code. Maybe as a homework, try to play around with this exact code that I have here. Maybe try to do addition, very simple things like addition and multiplication, and then try to build simple MCP servers so that you get a hang of how the tools and resources work, how this entire, which is a very simple code file, how this entire thing is working, and then how we are actually converting it into a, an MCP server, and how does cursor know, or the AI client know which tool to call. So that's a homework from my end. You don't have to build something very fancy or something very difficult. I'll share the link to this code, so maybe you can just play around with this code right here. All you need to do is make changes in this tool part and this resources part, make it do simple things like addition, multiplication, and then build your own MCP server. That's when you'll understand how MCP servers work. So that was the demo part of it. Now let's go back to the presentation, because we also have some great resources from Microsoft. So here's one for anybody who is getting to know about MCP for the first time. Go to your browser, type aka.ms/mcp hyphen for hyphen beginners. Then you can also go to the full form of MCP, which is Model Context Protocol.io, to know what's new, to stay updated, to learn a little bit of more theory. And if you are a JavaScript developer, you can also go to aks.ms/let's learn MCP hyphen JavaScript. Take a screenshot of these resources, because this is what will help you learn more. And that's all from my end. What I'll do right now is I'll share the GitHub code so that you could play around with it and do the assignment or the homework that I just mentioned. And I'll also mention and also make sure that it's also added in the description below so that you all can play around with it. And with that, it's a wrap for this session.
Okay, thank you so much, Haimantika ma'am, for this session.
Of course. Do we have any questions or anything as such?
I am not able to see any questions at the moment.
Okay, I have sent the link to the code here on the chat,
Hmm.
the private chat, so maybe you can
Yes,
add
I'll,
that on the description.
yes, ma'am. Adding that to the comment section as well here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, ma'am, for the session, and thank you everyone for joining.
Amazing. Thanks a lot.